Imagine walking into a warehouse at midnight and the place is alive. Conveyors moving, pallets shifting, shelves updating, orders being picked up and routed. Yet it's quiet, efficient, and it barely needs the lights on. Not because it's some dystopian fantasy, but because the machines don't need lighting the way humans do. They navigate with sensors, depth cameras, mapping, scheduling software, AI coordinating what is essentially an industrial ant colony. And the reason this matters is because China isn't talking about this like it's a debate. China is building it, scaling it, and turning it into a competitive weapon. The International Federation of Robotics reported that China installed 27,288 industrial robots in 2023, which was 51% of global installations, more than the rest of the planet combined in that year. Reuters reported that China's robot density hits 470 robots per 10,000 workers in 2023, overtaking Germany. That's not innovation theatre. That's the physical economy being automated at scale. And while China treats AI and robotics like national infrastructure, factories, logistics, ports, manufacturing, we in Australia keep flirting with the most self-sabotaging idea imaginable. Suppress it, slow it down, ban it, pause it, regulate it into the ground until it's harmless. That instinct is not new, it's generational. Every major technological shift has triggered the same reflex in older cohorts. This is dangerous, this is corrupting, this is ruining society. People wanted to ban television, then video games, then the internet, then smartphones. Even now, you'll hear the smartphone panic. We should ban them for the kids. Ban social media, ban everything. The problem is, you can ban yourself into irrelevance. The world doesn't stop because you are uncomfortable. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. The West isn't in a position to play purity politics with productivity. Australia is in a productivity slump. This is not a vibe, it's measurable. The ABS has pointed out that by the June quarter 2025, labour productivity levels were roughly back around pre-pandemic levels, and where they were in late 2019. The RBA has also discussed how slowed productivity growth weighs on supply capacity and incomes. This matters because productivity is basically the engine of living standards. When productivity stalls, everything feels like it's getting more expensive and harder, because it is. Australian Bureau of Statistics, Reserve Bank of Australia, and the housing crisis is the perfect case study in how going backwards looks in real life. Australia has seen a huge housing shortage, and the pipeline isn't meeting national targets. The National Housing Supply and Affordability Council has warned about supply constraints even as conditions shift. Industry commentary, drawing on recent Productivity Commission findings, has pointed out a brutal claim. Housing productivity has fallen massively over decades, meaning it takes more effort and cost to deliver the same output. We are effectively making housing slower, harder, and more expensive in a country that should be able to build homes in its sleep. Now zoom out. We are a nation drowning in resources. Iron ore, coal, gas, critical minerals, yet we behave like a raw materials suburb of the future rather than a builder of it. Australia's own government resources reporting shows iron ore is forecast to remain the largest export earner and around a quarter of resource and energy commodity earnings over the next couple of years. Meanwhile, the Future Made in Australia agenda explicitly argues we need to refine and process more critical minerals onshore to capture more value up the supply chain. That's the core issue. If you only export the dirt, you import the intelligence. You export lithium, you import batteries. You export ores, you import finished machines. That is how a resource-rich country ends up feeling poor. And that's why AI isn't some optional tech bro toy. It's the lever that turns raw potential into actual capacity. How you modernize industry, reduce waste, and compete with countries building automated supply chains at scale. Now look at our energy transition, because this is where the political argument gets real. The Albanese government is pushing major programs like the Capacity Investment Scheme, which underwrites revenue to reduce investor risk and accelerate new renewable generation and storage. There's also Rewiring the Nation, investing in transmission so renewable energy can actually reach the grid reliably. On the emission side, the safeguard mechanism applies to larger emitters and has been reformed, with a government review scheduled in 2026 to 2027. You can support those goals and still say the obvious. If you do this transition badly, if you create endless friction, delays, inefficiencies, you don't just fail on climate, you fail economically. And you create political backlash that stalls the whole thing. And the real bottleneck isn't ideology, it's physics and infrastructure, the grid. AEMO's reporting shows constraints are a real feature of the system in certain locations and conditions. And transmission delays can worsen the ability to use cheap renewables. Independent analysis has also modelled how delays in planned transmission build-out can lead to large amounts of additional curated renewable energy. Translation: we can build the generation, but if we can't move the electricity, we end up wasting it or blocking connections. This is where AI belongs. Not as a culture war topic, but as an optimization layer across the whole system. Forecasting congestion, management, predictive maintenance, scheduling storage, balancing supply and demand. Preventing failures before they happen. The energy transition without AI isn't brave, it's clumsy. Now add demographics, because this is the silent reason automation is inevitable. Australia's fertility rate is at record lows. ABS reported a total fertility rate of 1.48 in 2024. This isn't just a social trend. It's a labour and tax-based problem over time. At the same time, parts of the workforce face ongoing shortages, even as conditions fluctuate. Jobs and Skills Australia has reported easing shortages overall, but gaps persist. The blunt reality is, in an ageing society with a lower birth rate, we'll just hire more people. Becomes less and less believable. AI and automation don't just replace workers. Increasingly, they replace missing workers. Jobs and Skills Australia. Now here's where people expect me to say, so AI will take your jobs. That's the wrong frame. The real story is, AI changes what a job is. It's not man versus machine, it's man plus machine. People supervising systems, handling edge cases, making judgment calls, doing quality control, managing risk, and using AI as a force multiplier. And this is where Australia has a choice. Be a country that fights the tool, or a country that turns the tool into leverage. Because we already know how to do automation when we want to. Mining is the proof. Rio Tinto, for example, describes where 90% of its haul trucks fly autonomous, improving safety and productivity. Australia can lead when it chooses to. The question is whether we choose that mindset across the rest of the economy, or we keep acting like technology is a moral containment. Now let's bring in the construction robot. Because this is the moment the script needs to land like a hammer. While we argue about whether AI is scary, Australia already has prototypes that could change housing and construction. The ABC reported on a spider-like semi-autonomous robot called Charlotte. Developed by Crest Robotics and Earth-Built Technology, combining robotics with 3D printing to build structural elements. With researchers pointing labour to constraints and delays as key housing challenges. That's not a gimmick. That's a tool aimed directly at the choke points of Australian housing: time, labour, and cost. And then there's Lighten 3D, whose AI-powered 3D construction technology has been used in building what's described as Australia's first 3D printed multi-storey house, with reporting noting a 4-bedroom build timeline measured in weeks rather than the typical This is what people miss. AI doesn't just automate office work. It changes the physical world. It changes the speed a country can build homes, deploy infrastructure, run supply chains, and modernise the grid. So when someone says we should suppress AI, what they're really saying is we should suppress our own capacity to compete and build. And yes, we should regulate our AI, of course. We should demand safety standards, transparency where appropriate, strong privacy rules, and liability when systems cause harm. But regulation is not suppression. Regulation is how you domesticate power without handing it over to someone else. Because if Australia overreacts and strangles AI adoption, while China keeps scaling robotics, factories, logistics, manufacturing, you get a future where Australia becomes even more dependent. Not just on imports, but on foreign industrial capacity. You can't run a modern country on vibes and speeches. You need throughput. You need infrastructure. You need the ability to build. And that's why I keep saying Australia is at risk of going backwards. Not because we lack talent, and not because we lack resources. We have both. But we act like a country that's terrified of its own potential. We export value, import finished products, and then pretend we are transitioning while getting stuck in delays, bottlenecks, and culture war paralysis. This is the fork in the road. One future is us working side by side with AI, using it to modernise mining, expand advanced manufacturing, optimize energy, accelerate housing construction, build critical minerals, processing onshore, and turn Australia from a quarry into a builder. The other future is us banning, suppressing, delaying, overreacting, until we wake up and realize the world didn't slow down. It just chose different winners. So no, don't suppress AI. Don't treat it like a sinful temptation. Treat it like electricity. Powerful, dangerous if misused, transformative if integrated properly. Because the question isn't whether AI is coming. It's whether Australia is going to use it to build, or whether we are going to keep arguing while other nations quietly automate the world in the dark. Quick heads up before we keep going. I've got a Facebook page where I post a lot more of this stuff. It's not a business page, it's not monetized, and it's not a brand. It's a non-profit page. I run it purely because I think these conversations actually matter. No sponsors, no ads, no fake positivity, just raw clips, thoughts, arguments, humour, and uncomfortable topics people avoid. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not pushing an agenda. It's just a place for people who still like thinking, questioning, disagreeing, and laughing without everything being cleaned up for algorithms. If you agree with me, disagree with me, or just want somewhere that isn't filtered to death, the link's there. You'll usually see stuff there before it ever hits YouTube. Alright, back to the video. In other news, so the UK didn't really cancel digital ID. They just pretended to. They dropped the idea of one big government card because people hated it. Too obvious. Too surveillance state. Bad optics. Now it's softer, cleaner, fragmented. You still need digital ID to get a job, to use government websites, to claim benefits, to access health services, to prove who you are online. The only difference is, it's not one card anymore. It's your bank, your passport, your NHS login, your tax account, your employer system, all stitched together. They didn't remove the system. They just hid it inside institutions people already trust. So everyone feels like they won, but functionally, nothing changed. You are still a profile, just spread across apps. And honestly, that's probably the smarter way to do it. In other news, some new upcoming horror games for 2026. New official Halloween video game, simply titled Halloween, often referred to as Halloween, the game, is in development by IllFonic. The game lets players take on the role of Michael Myers and the survivors from the film's world. A new Hellraiser video game is officially in the works. It's called Clive Barker's Hellraiser Revival. And it's a real upcoming game based on the Hellraiser horror franchise. This is widely considered the first major standalone Hellraiser video game, outside of small appearances like Pinhead in Dead by Daylight. It's being made with Clive Barker's involvement, which suggests the franchise's dark psychological horror roots. Silent Hill Townfall, future Silent Hill project, expected around 2026. There is widespread discussion and interest in a new Elm Street project among fans. Some filmmakers and horror media, including, talk about potential casting ideas or creative directions. Several headlines recently speculate on the possibility. In early 2026, on the Moonshots podcast, Musk suggested that saving money for retirement might become unnecessary over the next 10 to 20 years, because advances in AI, robotics, and energy could lead to extreme abundance where traditional financial planning loses meaning. So now is the best time to invest in precious metals or crypto. Do you guys have any recommendations for any videos you'd like to see me talk about? Drop them in the comments. Now back to the video. Iran is not collapsing on camera. It is eroding in real time. What we are watching is not one uprising, not one revolution, not one simple story of good versus evil. It is a slow collision between a population that no longer believes in the system and a system that no longer knows how to survive. The protests that continue to surface across Iran are rooted in something deeper than any single event. Inflation has destroyed savings. The currency has collapsed. Youth unemployment has hollowed out ambition. Housing is unattainable. Stability feels fictional. For millions of Iranians, life is no longer about progress. It is about endurance. And when endurance fails, people speak. At first the protests were economic. Then they became political. Then they became existential. The chants stopped being about prices and started being about power, about legitimacy, about whether this system still has the right to exist in the form it does. But Iran is not a country with one enemy. It is a country with many internal wars laid on top of each other. Inside the state itself are factions. The clerical establishment, whose authority rests on religious legitimacy and revolutionary legacy. The Revolutionary Guard, whose power is not only military, but economic and political. The intelligence networks, the prison systems, militias, these are not separate institutions. They are a self-protecting ecosystem. Each one survives by ensuring the others survive. But even inside this ecosystem, there are tensions. Some officials believe repression can continue forever. Others quietly know it cannot. Some fear reform more than collapse. Others fear collapse more than reform. But none of those disagreements are allowed to surface publicly, because public fracture is fatal. Opposite them is not one opposition, it is many. Students, workers, women, ethnic minorities, urban youth, rural communities, secular liberals, religious reformers, monarchists, leftists, nationalists, armed groups in some regions, peaceful networks in others, some inside Iran, some in exile, some cooperating, many distrusting each other. This fragmentation protects the regime more than any weapon ever could, because a divided opposition cannot replace a unified power structure. Now add the casualty question. There is no transparent, independently verifiable death toll. Iran does not release reliable numbers. Journalists are restricted. Internet blackouts prevent confirmation. Human rights organisations estimate deaths in the hundreds to thousands. Some opposition sources claim far higher numbers. Those higher figures cannot be independently verified. The only honest statement is this: people are dying, the state is hiding it, and the real number will likely never be fully known. Tens of thousands have been detained. Many face charges that can carry execution. Trials move quickly. Lawyers are restricted. Families are intimidated. The legal system is not acting as justice. It is acting as deterrence. Now the international layer enters. Western governments issue condemnations, impose limited sanctions, and speak carefully. Not because they do not care, but because Iran sits inside a region where every decision carries the risk of escalation. Energy markets, alliances, Israel, Gulf states, Russia, China. Iran is never just Iran in global politics. And then there is Donald Trump. Trump is not president, but he is still one of the loudest political voices in the world. When he speaks about Iran, he does not speak in diplomatic language. He frames Iran as a failing enemy. He frames protests as proof of regime weakness. He speaks in absolutes, not nuance. For Iranian protesters, his words can feel like recognition. For Iranian leadership, his words are propaganda gold. Every time Trump praises the protests, the regime can say they are foreign-driven. Every time he threatens Iran rhetorically, the regime can say national survival is at stake. Every time he simplifies Iran into a villain, the leadership can wrap itself in nationalism. Trump does not control Iran's future, influences how its struggles is framed. Resistance, destiny, identity. When these stories fail, fear becomes the only tool left, and fear has an expiration date. Now the Western left. This is where silence becomes visible. Many activists in the West see global politics through anti-imperial lenses. That lens is not wrong, but it becomes dangerous when it can only see Western wrongdoing and becomes blind to non-Western oppression. Some remain quiet about Iran because they fear validating Western intervention narratives. Some prioritize other conflicts that fit more comfortably into existing moral frameworks. Some simply do not know how to hold two truths at once. That Western powers can be destructive, and non-Western regimes can also be brutally authoritarian. To Iranian descendants, that silence feels like abandonment. They are not asking for bombs. They are asking to not be ignored. Now the future. In the short term, the regime will likely survive, not because it is loved, but because it still controls force. History shows regimes fall not when people hate them, but when those enforcing them stop believing in them. There is not yet clear evidence of a large-scale fracture inside Iran's security forces, but erosion is happening. Trust is eroding. Legitimacy is eroding. Fear is becoming less effective. Young people are no longer emotionally invested in preserving a system that offers them no future. This means Iran is entering a long instability phase, not a short revolutionary one. Protests will rise, they will be crushed, they will return. They will change form, they will go quiet. They will re-emerge, each cycle leaving deeper scars. Trump will continue speaking about Iran. Iranian leaders will continue using his words. Western governments will continue balancing morality and geopolitics. Protesters will continue living between those forces. And here is the hardest truth. It is not rising because of America. It is not suffering because of Trump. And it will not be saved by him either. Iran's future will be decided by Iranians. By how long fear can outweigh hope. By how long power can survive without belief. By how long a society can live inside a system it no longer trusts. What the world is watching is not a revolution. It is a slow test of endurance. And every system that relies on endurance instead of loyalty eventually learns the same lesson. People can survive almost anything, but they do not endure forever. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.